CJTV is not a political media recirculation livestream. CJTV is analytical and nonpartisan. CJTV Research Statement, focusing on the how and why based on scholarly peer review research. Peer review refers to the process where experts and other researchers, peers, in a specific field evaluate a scholarly work, such as an article or research paper, to ensure its quality, accuracy, and validity before every livestream.
Another day of snow, ice, torture, and the fear of it's coming again. That's good. It gives everybody a time to sit down, crack a book, and become, as Homer Simpson said, learned. Chats are open. Welcome to CJTV. It's not a special edition. It's the same academic profile. But tonight we're covering something a little bit more critical than the norm. Anyone ever had an argument with somebody or a contingency and the words were used such as, yeah, take me to court. Sue me. Please, take me to court. I look forward to it. Be careful in the choice and venue of words that you choose, because not all judges are what they seem to be in the perspective of society, so to say. Let's kind of get on with this. I'm going to give a few kudos out here for a second for the assisting researcher. That would be Dylan McDonald. Dylan McDonald, remember that name, upcoming rising star in the world of criminal justice. One of those things that, going to be happening pretty soon. We're getting everything, waiting for everything to get popped off here, waiting for our partners in the social media world to connect. We do apologize for last night. That was not us. It was a short cutoff for YouTube. There was like a dead zone. But for the special episode of the your concealed carry permit and the U.S. Code, Rumble and X seem to play the whole thing. Let me say that again. Rumble and X seem to play the whole live stream beginning to end. YouTube, not so much. So, but that's okay. We're going to be posting the full edition up here this evening so everybody can get that recap on it. We're going to give it a couple of seconds, then we're going to kick this off. Yes, we're going to kick it off. While we're waiting for people to get here, remember, we have a fundraiser going. 2026 fall semester, not spring semester, fall semester. Fund someone. Stop throwing your money toward worthless podcasts that stir the gloom and doom. Learn something. Scan it. Open it up. Drop $1, drop $2. Drop what you can. Do something that's worthy for the future of a true constitutional republic and those in the CJ system that are going to do their job under the legislative law of a constitutional republic. Oh my gosh, that's just so hard to critically understand and hurts feelings sometimes. Regardless of the partisan venue that you're on, it does not matter. It's a constitutional republic, a democracy with democratic principle. All right, we got everything going here. It's all good to go. Take a snapshot of this. We're going to get rid of it. Please help a student out. Be a professional. Be a good one. Again, I'm going to close this out too. Our assistant main researcher here, along with myself, Dylan McDonald, UT.utm.edu. If you got any questions about this episode, shoot him an email or shoot me an email. Right below the ticker here, down here, right over there. Dr. Mike Lee G, gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, and on Facebook for the actual, page that we have, it's not a, personal private page of, exploration of joy and, friendship. It's mainly for this show. Any research, any live stream that we do, all of the actual data, the PDFs, everything is there for easy download, easy transcript. Open it up, and here we go. The production crew has showed up with the glorious cup of live stream energy and power from the glorious shotgun mug. Yes, so everyone watching us, thank the production crew that is working hard behind the scenes like the researchers. As I said, we're on Facebook. Everything's downloadable. It's a media fire. YouTube, Rumble, live on Rumble right now. X, not so much anymore. You got too much drama. And you only have one crappy server in Virginia. So that's just the truth. There you go, Elon. Buy a new server. All right, Dylan, about to shut you off. Bam. There you go. Now, let's go ahead and get this show kicked off. So I know people have lives and we want to be, as Homer said, learned. To judge or to be judged, the United States Constitution says nothing about judges being required to have a law degree. The Bar Association, the British Accreditation Registry. Anybody notice that just suddenly vanished on the internet? The British, I thought it was, a long time ago since, 1776 or pre-1776. The Bar, British Accreditation, commoner, kingship, common law, legislative. Yep. In fact, the Constitution contains no specific educational or professional litigation, words, verbiage, or age requirement for federal judges at all. Federal judges, municipal judges, juvenile court judges, criminal judges, nothing there whatsoever. But there's a contingency for a presidency. There are details for presidency, but not a judge. Not a judge or a federal judge over a 1 through 9 that a president would have to argue or fight against. Not that the president would argue or fight against them, it would be, theoretically in, their head when they're asleep with their giant head asleep on their little tiny pillow, but is what it is. There's nothing in the Constitution. So here's the breakdown. What the Constitution says regarding the judiciary and how that silence has been interpreted over the years, the decades, the hundreds. What the Constitution actually says. The Constitution sets out the requirements for the judiciary, period. Judiciary, meaning those that are in the judiciary review, judges, executive, judiciary, legislative, judiciary review of a legislative word of law that was written and imposed upon us glorified to us and esteemed to us like a fiery, sugary, sweet piece of bread, because society voted for the executive position that wrote the legislative word of law, and the judiciary, the judges that interpret it and make that final decision. The interpretation. Article 3, Section 1, the text specifies only 3 things in the Constitution regarding federal judges. Period. Done. Over. Vesting of power. Power, the man, the cloven hoof of you shall obey. Yeah, okay. Comedy is great, but yet it's the vesting of power, the enforcement of the legislative word of law, the one that makes the ultimate decision, good or bad, whether you agree with it or not. Chats are open. Throw a thumbs up in the chat. We're only monitoring Rumble, and we're only monitoring YouTube. That's all we're doing. We're broadcasting on Rumble and YouTube tonight. Your Virginia server is too much torment. The vesting of power, extreme. It establishes the Supreme Court and gives the Congress the power to create lower courts. Ooh, the Supreme Court. SCOTUS. The ones with the ultimate interpretation, the ultimate decision. Send it back, send it forward. Send it where thine deems it must go for revision back to the states. Everybody remember when everybody lost their mind? Roe v. Wade just went crazy? That was here recently. It was an opinion. It went back to the states. Thus, the states challenged, revamped, created judiciary. Tenure is number 2. Tenure. Judges shall hold their office during the time period of good behavior, meaning the judge has to have good credibility, ethical practice. The venue, everything's got to be suitable for society to interpret as, this is good for us. This is good for me. The good behavior. This effectively grants them lifetime appointment. Lifetime. What are you going to do? Fire the boss because he's great? No, you're not going to fire the boss. Number 1, you're not the boss, but if the boss is great, work for the great boss, correct? Everybody wants a mentor and a leader, not just a boss. But if the boss is the mentor and a leader, ethical decision, clerical skills, continuum, the law of intensity, the law of recency, practice, inferaneous knowledge through experience and leadership and mentorship and education and tenure of applying what one is doing over time. That's what one wants in a judge. But as they can only be removed by impeachment, that would be the U.S. Supreme Court, federal judges. Compensation. Their salaries cannot be diminished while they hold office. Holy wow, you can't cut the salary, but you can take a salary cut of your own. The text, Article 3, Section 1. And I'm going to read this straight from the Constitution. And for those of you that are offended that I'm going to read something straight from the Constitution. Yeah, you may want to get on a computer, go to a library, preferably a library, look the Constitution up and read along with me, but I'll do it for you right here. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, meaning the Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. Inferior, meaning lower than the Supreme Court. Now, when we're talking lower, we're talking Supreme, we're talking federal, we're talking district, we're talking state, we're talking county, we're talking city, we're talking civil. Man, within all of those definitive words that I just said are multiple areas of the court judiciary review. And everyone would love to think that everyone in that judiciary seat wearing the cool Gandalf wizard cloak with the gambit and the loudspeaker and the cool pen and the constant supply of water and the computer and the interpretation and the person to the side with the typewriter, typing all the words, keeping your record, your historical venue alive forever. One would like to think that that person is educated with a Juris Doctorate, has the experience, the intensity, the inferaneous laws of learning. Remember that, inferaneous. Continued practice, repetition, because one is educated. It's continued. It's a habit. It's not an impromptu. So you're not looking for a puppet to judge a show, right? The judges both of the Supreme and the inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall, at stated times, receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. So, you're not going to be able to cut a judge's paycheck. Man, what if it's a crappy judge in a civil court that has no law degree, that was just voted in, that makes horrible decisions? Now, you're like, who is this guy to say this and who is this guy to ask that? Who is this guy to push the finger toward that? I've got 35 years of it. I've seen a lot of crappy decisions by judges that have no law degree. I've seen a lot of failure to notice for, hey, you can appeal. And I've seen a lot of appellate appeals that went totally against what the JD, Juris Doctorate judge had nothing. Went against the decision, totally overturned it. Bad decisions. You will notice there is no mention of Juris Doctorate or passing the bar exam. The bar. Everybody puts a lot of weight in the bar exam. The bar. So does the bar itself with the review of new judiciary seats, the federal district judges. Yeah, we're going to talk about that too. The British Accreditation Registry. Not the American, but the British. Common law, kingship, commoner. Yeah. So away it goes. We're going to have fun with this one tonight. There's nothing in the Constitution about passing a bar exam or being a lawyer. Why? You're going to cover that too. The appointment process, because the Constitution does not list qualifications. I thought have you ever heard that the Constitution is the king daddy of documents, the continuing, living, breathing, growing document? But it's 2026, and we've had so many crap judges in society, so many good and bad judges in the United States Supreme Court, so many great judges and so many horrible judges, and the Constitution is ever-changing, breathing, shifting, but I guess it lost its breath and fell over sideways because there's nothing in the Constitution that lists qualifications. The only check on who becomes a judge is the appointment and the confirmation process outlined in Article 2, Section 2. We're going to get into that too. The President, Supreme Court of the United States, federal district, federal judges, the President nomination. The Senate must provide advice and consent, confirm the nomination. So during the confirmation, and I'm going to help you out with this, the Senate. Okay, the Senate, the House, the Senate, they're all, Congress as a whole, but it's going to be the Senate that actually does, the confirmation for, this. So you're going to hear this, Senate, meeting, Senate, contingency of argument too. Question. Negative, positive. So you always got this, one side of the post and the good side of the post. You got a judge that's on, a partisan side, and then, half the Senate's on one side, half the Senate's on the other side. Of course, you're going to have negative and positive. It's a double-edged sword of Damocles. It's like a mouse trap. So whoever that judge that's in that hot seat for, I don't know, confirmation or, because they were nominated, it's up to the Senate. It's just a big argument. It's a big theoretical argument of imposing, give me an answer to where I feel comfortable and your possibility of making a future decision to please me. It's just the way it works. In theory, the president could nominate anybody. Could nominate, I don't know, Mickey Mouse. Crap. Didn't we say, Waldo on the internet for, mayor of a location? It's a joke, people. A law professor, a politician, a business leader. The man with no legal background at all can be nominated. Now, that is not saying that the Senate is going to approve this, right? Because there's going to be a whole bunch of Juris Doctorate involved. What university, what college, what institution, what this, that, or other that somebody attend, who was it? And, what was your GPA? Were you the, super leader of the space shuttle lawyer door gunner team? The Senate is going to ask questions to get credibility and validity of someone's merit. That is the way it's supposed to. Does it happen that way all the time? Obviously not. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if everything's coming through smooth and clear, because we had to make a few adjustments after last night's show. So the Senate acts as a filter. Historically, the Senate is almost exclusively confirmed individuals who are legal professionals when it comes to the one subject that they are trying or are challenged with confirming. Thus, a judge. An example would be shift and change of presidents, shift and change of specific leaders, executives in positions. The DOD, now the Department of War, the DOW, the ATF, the FBI, those that go through Senate confirmation, questions, Senate votes. We approve. Yay, great. We don't approve. Well, let's be for real about it. Who cares? You could throw a dish on the floor and it crack and nobody's going to care. Still going to be seated. Traditionally, that's the way it works, just like a judge. Historical content, context, reading the law. And this comes straight from those of you that are constitutionalists, straight from the Constitution. While it is standard practice today for Supreme Court justices and federal judges, judges to have granted from, graduation policy or graduation esteem, confirmation from prestigious law schools, that was not always the case. And here's one of the sour pills for society to swallow. On both sides of political avenue, or 4 sides of political avenue, or 5 sides, or 6 sides, or whatever sides, partisan, nonpartisan, you always hear the founding father argument. You always hear the argument of historical venue. That's cool. But in the early history of the United States, former law schools did not exist, and they were rare. And they especially did not exist during the inception, cognitive inception, writing script of the Constitution. Declaration of Independence. Where did the school or the education come from? Another country. Passed down. Taught. Nothing formally documenting a Juris Doctorate. It came from commoners, citizens of society that understood the word of common law, understood the word of what a people wanted as a future country. So, early history, they were rare. Many lawyers and judges became attorneys by reading the law, not going to instructional institutions to be taught. Reading, meaning interpretation. Now, I know everybody here watching this show has heard of, a jailhouse lawyer. Well, now you've got a sociological lawyer reading the book, interpretation. This involved apprenticeship under a practicing attorney rather than attending a university. And we're talking pre-doctrine of the Constitution. And we're about to get on with this a little bit, a little bit further. Examples. I know some of you are dying. You want the example. You want the exemplar. Why is this guy talking about this? Historical. Examples. All right. Supreme Court justices who did not graduate from law school, though most were legally trained and admitted to the bar. Supreme Court justices who did not graduate law school. James Byron, 1941, 1942. He never attended college or law school. He apprenticed at a law office and read the law. Do your own research. A Supreme Court justice, no law school, no Juris Doctorate. Decisions, opinions, the rule of the country, rule of the land. Isn't that a historical? Look up some of the decisions and opinions that James Byron was affiliated or associated with. May make your jaw hit the floor. Robert H. Jackson, 1941, 1954. He attended Albany Law School for 1 year, but did not graduate. He read the law and was admitted to the bar. Admitted. It's kind of like saying I'm a kung fu master to the crowds and displaying some bullshito. And then suddenly the Kung Fu Association of the planet gives me a black belt of, discovery and superpower. It's the same thing. But it's all Bushido. It's all Lawshido. Yeah, I know. Everybody knows what Bushido is, but Lawshido. It's the continuum of the decisions that have been made over the length of the United States to say, hey, we have Supreme Court justices to make decisions, and it has standing precedent. It has reliability. It has historical value. Stanley Reed, 1938, 1957. He studied too. Abraham Lincoln, chalk on a shovel. Excuse me, that was coal, wasn't it? Was that coal or chalk? It was coal. I'm right. It was coal. Coal in the back of a shovel. Fireplace. They only, no light bulbs, no LEDs, no incandescents. He studied law, both at university, both at the University of Virginia and Columbia. Two law schools. 1938, 1957. 2 law schools. You would think somebody would have graduated from one of those schools, right? What do they call somebody that's been in a single program for 8 years? Dr. MD. Dr. MD. This guy attends 2 law schools, never graduated. Let me help everybody. 2 law schools, Virginia, Columbia, never graduated, yet sat as a Supreme Court justice, never received a degree from either one. Is anybody's skin crawling yet? Is anybody's brain pounding? Is anybody seeing the relevance of change and shift in time to where a political venue from a few years ago says the same thing that a political venue says now, and suddenly it's making you hurt because society tells you that you must conform to one versus the old? And now here you see the Supreme Court of the United States. The country itself was affected by, we're going to make laws, opinions, decisions about what thine shall do in the future, set precedent, relevance, historical venue, case study, reliability. Now it's going to sit here in the presence of 2026. I just gave you 3 Supreme Court justices of the United States of America that did not historically venue, no law degree. Hell, even one of them went to 2 universities. Yes, I said it. Hell, it's all academic. But we can say it, there is, religion within criminal justice, psychology, and sociology. So, spectrumly there, would be, an up and a down. Now, let's get back to the topic. Give me a thumbs up in the chat. Let me know this stuff is coming through. We got our new audio stuff going. We're only running on Rumble. We're only running on YouTube right now. So, state versus federal judge. It's important to distinguish between federal and state judges. Yes. Very distinguished. Very. As noted, U.S. Constitution imposes no requirement. They're appointed. Federal judges, federal. Appointed. You could like Bob. Bob, you're a judge. Confirmation. Senate. Thank you. Party-based. Hate to break the bones off to everybody. It's all going to be party-based. Everybody knows this. We're not arguing party, good or bad. It's party-based. Done, over. That is the reality of it for Senate confirmation. State judges. Each state has its own constitution. For those of you that did not know, there is a U.S. Constitution, and there is the allowance in the Constitution for states to self-govern under state self-constitution. That fantastic thing called the Ninth Amendment. Yes. If it's not listed in the Constitution or federal, jurisdictionary, or judicial or legislative word of law for review under executive defining word, executive definition, state has the power to do its own. So therefore, if there's nothing in the Constitution, the state can impose its own policy for judges seated as executive judiciary review in the state. It's a brain burner, I know. It's like, oh, this guy's teaching me so much because I've always argued, well, let's take it to court. Be careful what you say. Be careful of the statement of, I dare you, take me to court. Sue me. You just may wind up the one with the bad end of the bargain. For example, in substates, magistrates or justices of the peace. Now, I know somebody would say, oh, it's just a magistrate or a justice of the peace. Well, somebody that would marry you or, just hear something small. Ooh, pre-tell, back up. It's not what you think it is. It has a lifelong effect and a bad decision. Why? That judge will operate with impunity. Yes. You're not going to be able to prosecute a judge for a bad, crappy decision. You're not going to be able to prosecute a judge for a decision that is against the law. Let me say this again. Impunity, no prosecution for a judge with true intent, good behavior, ethical decision, ethical interpretation that can articulate it, but it's still a bad decision. There is no intent to harm. There is no intent to violate the law, but it's still a bad decision. Impunity. Good luck suing him. Good luck prosecuting him. And in some jurisdictions, that decision stands. There have been many lives ruined by judges in seats with no law degree, no tenure, no merit, no experience, no background, no training. Heck, how many lives were destroyed with the 3 seated in the United States Supreme Court that were just wooden teeth good guy seats? Yeah, I said it. Wooden teeth good guy seats. The wooden teeth, they didn't have dentures back then. Yeah, I don't know. I would assume. But they have plastic back then? No. So, state judges, though they're, judges, are state judges, appointed, seated, elected, have to, hit that, requirement for training at the state level. Training. It's kind of like law enforcement. Got to have that minimum standard, that, post standard, that, academic, that physical. Well, judges have the same thing, but it's all left up to the state if someone is voted into the position. No guarantee for a law degree. That's a hard one to swallow, isn't it? That's a hard one. The United States Constitution contains no requirement that federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, must hold a law degree or even be licensed to practice law. Swallow that pill. Swallow that pill for a moment. Choke it down. Forget the Matrix, red pill, blue pill, Keanu Reeves and the cool kung fu dude with the glasses. Choke this pill down. Choke it. Challenge you. Break out that Constitution and show me where it's set. How do I know? I've spent 5 days reading this thing. And I've spent years reading this thing because I teach constitutional law, constitutional procedure. I teach legislative law, legislative procedure. I do not teach legislative law as the legislative law of every state. I teach legislative law and procedure as in development and construct of legislative law. There's nothing in the Constitution that states any judge must have a degree or certified by the bar. Find it. You won't. And these are the people making your decisions on a daily basis. Who's shaking right now? Who's swagging that head back and forth? Pretty insane, isn't it? Let's cover a few more things before we get into the up-to-date 2026 edition of this. What's going on now with the judges? The nature of legal education since the 70s. Okay, let's not go way back to 1776, 1771, and the 20-year so-called revolution. You'd be surprised how many people think that the thing that is taught as the revolution or revolt lasted for, a week or two. That was a 20-year, extravaganza. So, since the 1700s, when the Constitution was written in 1787, the modern concept of law school did not exist in the United States. It didn't exist. So, it's good that you would have, different sides of politics or avenues, partisans arguing and stating the founding fathers. That's awesome. That's great. But no law school, no standing degree of education. The first law school in the United States, Litchfield Law School in Connecticut, was founded in 1784. So swallow that pill down also. 1776, 1784. So even after the Constitution was developed, you still have a time period, no law school. Where did all this ideology, rhetoric, edict, definitive explanation, where did the words come from? Something hard to swallow right now for all of the hardcore. Wear your t-shirt that says 1776 on it, right? The Constitution. Now, I'm not pro it. I'm not against it. I am telling you this so that you would be a little bit more educated and understand your historical venue before you open the mouth and do not taste the words that leave past the lips. 1784. And even then, it was a small proprietary institution. Harvard Law School did not even open until 1817. 1776, 1787, 1817. Swallow that. Do the math. So now you've got Litchfield running the course of the campus, small proprietary, all the way up to 1817. Harvard School of Law, Harvard School of Doctorate of whatever, squirrel hair burning, whatever it would be. That's an extensive amount of period for proprietary education and mentorship under what would be schooled attorneys, lawyers, counsel at Litchfield in the 1700s until Harvard, the king daddy of law, at the time in 1817. Again, let's get even deeper. Reading the law, 1700s, 1784, 1817, the time span between. Reading the law, almost all lawyers at the time included many founding fathers, right? Including many founding fathers became lawyers through reading the law. Simply reading the law. Do your own research. Reading the law. Not attending law school, but reading the law. Reading the law. Interpretation. It's kind of like reading a cooking recipe. Which is better? Let's see, we got a chat. That's why judges will try to get you to dismiss by both parties. They know the conundrum they get themselves in and just want it to go away. Ah, yes, the argument of reading the law, the interpretation. Now, one of the big things on that one statement is the right of appeal. A judge does not want to risk or will not say that you have the right of appeal. And if one says you have the right of appeal and blatantly puts it out there, there's that 50-50 shot in the kidney that's burning in the brain, which should be educated at law school, knowing that the interpretation of that judge themselves, as they say that, is possibly ill and would be overturned during an appeal. That winds all the way back to 1784, 1817. Reading the law. This was an apprenticeship system. Apprenticeship, kind of like, law enforcement, field training officer. You graduate the academy, you go to a department, and suddenly you're placed under some guy named Bob. And Bob says, my car, my console, my switches, my lights, my tools, no touchy, listen. So, same thing, apprenticeship. So, the country itself founded under a constitution, no direct information, no direct transcript of the law and the requirement of those to create, formulate, enforce, push, desire, design, let alone the Senate, let alone what you're taught is, the first P guy, the first president, when there were 10 before Washington. But that was president of the Senate, not the country. President of the Senate. You'll be surprised how many times I've sat in law schools and said that and watched very, very experienced attorneys and lawyers do the Scooby-Doo turn, because they didn't even know. The apprenticeship. Let's go on a little bit more. All right. The apprenticeship system was designed at that point in time for young men, young males. Yes, I said it, young males. You're talking about the 1700s. Don't throw the, time gap. We're talking about 1700s, all right? People, grown guys wore like flat, what are those flat shoes called that females wear with high socks and little bows on their pants? Knickers. Yeah, when guys wore knickers and had wooden teeth and wore white wigs. So times have changed. So the system, a young man would study under an experienced attorney. Now, typically those experienced, and mind you, those experienced attorneys that were in the colonies that affect legislative law today and the development of law schools, there were no law schools in the United States until 1784. Where do you think the attorneys came from? Another country, England. Founding fathers. So those ones at the time of 1817, 1784 to 1817 were senior. They were senior citizens, old. And let's be for real. Probably forgot a lot of stuff. Mental dilapidation, old, opinionated, angry. What was really taught? So it's all read the law, read this book, give an interpretation. Now, if you take the 1700s and wrap it into today, to 2026, that is case study, case interpretation, opinion in conclusion, and that is why there is peer review. That is why there is set precedent in the word of law, even today at 2026, for someone to case study, review, and use something that was an opinion and argue it back under an appeal in a courtroom, or even argue it into contingency for a direct trial that is happening in the moment. That is why courts have court investigators to ensure that the sentencing is fair and even across the board. Single offender, repeat offender, same sentencing. The bar exam didn't exist, but then development of the law school. Attorney for several years and then had to take the bar exam, or simple, to receive a certificate of good character. Good character. That's what the bar is, good character. You're the man. You've studied under me. You know how to make a critical decision about the future of someone else who has no scruples, who has no morals, who has no character. But here you go. You're a good dude. Go be a judge. Go be a lawyer. Now, if you're not believing anything you're hearing on this, judge or be judged, the fair judiciary review by a Juris Doctorate, please do your own research. Please. I beg of you, do. The conclusion to all of this before we get into 2026, the present, the now of Juris Doctorate is, if the farmers, the guys with the cows and the corn and, the dirt, the potatoes, required a law degree, they would have disqualified nearly every qualified lawyer in the county, including themselves, if the farmers needed a law degree. Why? The simple foundation, the distrust of aristocracy, right? The elitism. What, are you going to send a farmer to law school to know how to fight the aristocracy? The ones that were shipped over from thine element that was tyrannical to teach new law? That's why it's called the British, right? Accreditation Registry. Still, good character. Go to a law school, argue that. One more thing, and then we're going to go on to the 2026 and how it works today. Focus on character and credentials. This is critical here because it applies today during the voting period. Anybody ever seen vote for so-and-so judge of a district, judge of an area, judge of a region? Put a thumbs up in the chat. Right? Characteristics. The farmers back then in, the 1700s, believed that the most important qualification for a judge was character, not technical training. Life tenure. And this is coming from, reviewed manuscript of research, peer review. The primary check of the Constitution places on judges is that the judge, they, and meaning body of person, must hold their office during good behavior, essentially for life, unless